Mrs. Wolek, you stated earlier that during your first phone call from Katrina Karr, that you got the impression that she knew how and by whose hand Marco Dane had met his death. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's right.
And you stated before that you and Katrina Karr were not close friends. In fact, you emphasized that you were just casual friends. Is that also correct?
Yes.
Now, if Katrina Karr did indeed know how and by whose hand Marco Dane was killed, why did she telephone you, a casual friend, rather than a close friend? For that matter, why didn't she call the police?
I don't know. I guess it was because she, like I said before, was on drugs, and I guess she...
You guess what?
That maybe she felt that the police wouldn't believe her.
Because people on drugs are not known for their veracity, are they?
Object. Sustained.
Mrs. Wolek, you know what Katrina Karr's relationship was with Marco Dane?
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, well, obviously you're aware that Katrina Karr knew Marco Dane, hmm? But are you aware of how well she knew him?
Oh, I guess she knew him some, I assume.
You assume. You assume. Isn't it a fact, Mrs. Wolek, that you were well enough acquainted with Katrina Karr to know that she hated and despised Marco Dane? Isn't it a fact, Mrs. Wolek, that you know it was Marco Dane who supplied her with drugs? And isn't it a fact that you know why he supplied her with those drugs?
Your Honor, the witness is not on trial here. I mean, Mr. Callison is badgering this poor woman.
Now, Mr. Callison, surely you can get to your point in something other than an accusatory tone, huh?
Oh, yes, Your Honor. Yes, indeed. Mrs. Wolek, are you aware of what Katrina Karr did for a living? Did you hear the question?
Yes.
Then would you tell this court, please, what Katrina Karr did for a living?
She had various jobs.
I'm talking about her primary source of income. Do you know what that was? Very well, Mrs. Wolek. I will present you with a few facts that I have just had verified. Katrina Karr was a common prostitute. Furthermore, she was in that capacity directly connected to Marco Dane because it was Dane who procured men for her. Now, do you deny knowing all that?
No.
Then why did you omit that when you took the stand?
Because I didn't think it had any bearing on what Katrina said.
Oh, I see. Well, I believe the state will be able to show that it has considerably more bearing than you seem to think. But we'll get back to Miss Katrina Karr in just a little bit. Right now, I'd like to ask you some questions about another acquaintance of yours, namely Talbot Huddleston. Katrina Karr's phone call to you that night, from which you concluded that she knew who had killed Marco Dane.
Yes.
You said that she turned up missing.
Yes.
You tried every way you knew how to locate her, but you were unsuccessful.
Yes, that's right.
Would you tell the court just what means you used in trying to locate Katrina?
I called several people. I went to various places.
What sort of places?
First, I went to her hotel where she was living, and I found out that she had moved.
And where else did you look?
Various bars where she had hung out.
I see. Now, you testified earlier that you and this person, this prostitute, were only casually acquainted. And yet you're telling us now that you knew her various hangouts.
Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's implications are clearly out of order here.
Objection sustained. The jury will ignore Mr. Callison's last remarks.
Mrs. Wolek, after you received that phone call from Katrina Karr, Did you tell anybody about it?
Yes, I told Talbot Huddleston.
Isn't it true that you and your husband are good friends of the defendant, Victoria Lord Riley?
Yes, that's true.
Now, when the defendant was indicted, didn't you feel it incumbent upon yourself to tell your husband about that phone call?
Yes.
Then why didn't you?
I don't know. I guess I thought that...
You thought he might wonder how you happened to be acquainted with a prostitute.
Yes, I guess so.
All right, but there were other people you could have told, weren't there? Or did you refrain from telling them for the same reason?
Yes, I guess I did.
Well, then that brings us to the question of why you were willing to tell Talbot Huddleston, doesn't it? Why did you turn to Talbot Huddleston?
I told Mr. Huddleston because I couldn't find Katrina, and I was very frustrated that I couldn't find her. I knew she had some information, and I didn't have any financial means, and I knew that he could hire a private investigator, so I worked for him, and I went to him, and I told him the story.
Oh, yes, that's right. What is it that you did for the Huddleston firm, Mrs. Waller?
I modeled dresses.
And how long did you model dresses for the Huddleston firm?
I don't remember. It was several months.
Yeah. Then perhaps you could explain to this court why no one at the Huddleston firm remembers your ever having worked for them. Why no one there has ever heard of you. And while you're at it, Mrs. Wolek, perhaps you will also explain why since the time you came to Landview up until now, there is absolutely no record in the Huddleston Company files of your ever having been employed by them. The court is waiting for your explanation.
It's true. I never worked for the Huddleston Company.
In other words, you lied to this court. And I submit that if you could lie about one thing, you would be lying about everything else. In fact, your testimony could be one long tissue of lies.
No, it's not true. It's not true. Katrina came to me. She told me she knew who killed Mark, or she told me it was Talbot Huddleston. Vicki Riley didn't kill Mark, or she couldn't kill anybody. Please, you've got to believe me. It was Talbot Huddleston.
Order. Order in this court.
Your Honor, Mr. Callison has thoroughly succeeded in placing the witness, putting her through a great emotional strain. On the contrary, the witness, with some assistance, has put herself in this position. Had she been a truthful witness, this might never have happened.
Gentlemen, I have warned both of you repeatedly about this kind of behavior. I am declaring this court in recess for 1 hour. I would like to see both of you in my chambers.
All rise.
Karen, darling, why did you do it? You shouldn't have. You shouldn't have.